On Fanalysis, we use the analytics of fantasy football combined with the metrics of sports betting to find you the best plays every week. And we're joined now by a sports investment analyst from SportsGrid, Jared Smith. Jared, let's look at the Saturday games. And the Bills certainly look like Super Bowl contenders while the Colts just squeaked into the playoffs. But should the line ballooning to 7 scare Joe Public a little bit?
It should, but it hasn't. You know, we're seeing about 80%, 85% of the tickets here come in on Buffalo. And listen, I understand it. You've watched this Buffalo team just roll through the last part of their schedule. They've won 6 straight games by double digits, 3 straight by over 4 touchdowns, and they're covering the spread over their last 8 by an average of almost 15 points. That means they are outpacing the market, Steve, by 2 touchdowns. That is significant over an 8-game stretch. That's half the season. I mean, so everything we've seen from Buffalo has been incredible, but it can't be just this easy when you get to the playoffs, right? There has to be a little bit of come back to earthness. Maybe this Colts defense can provide a little bit of a stiff test for Buffalo this weekend.
And that's the thing. What you want to see out of a team is a team that is ascending as the season gets deeper, as they get deeper into the season, because that easily can carry over into the postseason as well. But this is also a return game of sorts for the Indianapolis Colts coach.
Yeah, and we all know Frank Reich, arguably the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL, on that field in Buffalo. I believe it was '93. I think it was the '93 divisional playoffs against the Oilers.
Your memory's better than mine. He can take it back that far.
I was 7 years old for that game.
Yeah,
I didn't watch that game, but I watched a lot of highlights of it since. Now, what does that mean for this game? It doesn't mean anything. But I think Frank Reich has that vibe that he's got a little swag going into Buffalo. And sometimes when it comes to the head coaching position, it's all about that confidence that you project onto your team. Now, this Colts defense should have some confidence. They're a very good defense, but their weakness is against the pass. And I think that is a little bit scary because obviously Buffalo does so well throwing the football with Josh Allen. But I don't know if you remember the game last year with Josh Allen and the Texans. I remember it very well because it was one of those games where you're like, is this guy going to be an NFL quarterback next year? He was throwing the ball into the stands. Like, it was a helter-skelter performance. He's looked calmer this year. He's looked like he's more settled, more in control. I expect Buffalo to play well. I've been invested in them in the futures market for quite some time. But I just feel like this game, the spread's a little too high. If you get the full 7, that's great. I think it's still playable at 6.5. I think the Colts keep this game a little bit closer than the experts think.
All right, the Seahawks. This game is a 3.5-point home favorite for the Seahawks against their division rival in the Rams. And these two teams have played some very tight battles through history. So this spread, while it seems small, actually is kind of big compared to this matchup itself.
Yeah, and a lot of intrigue with this game this week, Steve, because of the Jared Goff injury. I've watched him throw in practice this week. That's obviously as close as any of us are going to get to him this week. He looks okay. We'll see what happens when he's got Jamal Adams bearing down on him this week, who's been, you know, I know Jets fans don't want to hear it, but he's been unbelievable for Seattle this season, arguably the best secondary guy in the NFL. But I think when you look big picture on this Rams team, there's a lot to like. Even if Jared Goff isn't 100%, I really like this Rams defense. You've got the great equalizer in the secondary with Jalen Ramsey, who can eliminate DK Metcalf from this game. In fact, if you look at the box scores from previous games between these two teams, he did do a good job taking DK as that queen of the chessboard completely off the table. And I think deep down, this Rams team still has a little fight and fire to them because they know they're a little bit better, I think, than Seattle, top to bottom. The analytics say that the Rams are a better team. Now, Seattle's got Russell Wilson, who on that side of the ball is the great equalizer, but the Seahawks have had a little struggle moving the ball over the last few weeks. I think this is a great under spot, though. The third game between these two teams, they know each other better than anyone. And if I had to take a side, I would take the points, especially if I'm getting over a field goal with the Rams, which right now, before Goff gets announced he is 100% starting midweek, that's the number.
You mentioned the fact that DK has been kind of held down. The thing is, they can still throw to Lockett on the other side, so that offense doesn't seem to miss a beat. However, you mentioned the over-under there quite briefly, but does the fact that the Rams have the #1 defense entice you to take a look at the under here?
Absolutely. That's the big one. And these two teams, they combined for 29 and 39 points in their 2 regular season meetings. The total was in the mid-40s the last time they played. We've seen it come down now significantly into the low 40s. I would expect this thing to land right at 42. where the closing number is. We saw it open 43. You're seeing a little bit of sell back here to the 42.5, and I think that's where I grabbed it. But I think you're great to bet it here because I think there's still room for this number to fall. This total should be 39. But it's not. It's 42, and that key number of 42, 6 touchdowns, is where it'll probably land on.
The final Saturday game, Washington, an 8.5-point home dog to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Tampa may be better, but man, 8.5 seems like a really big number, doesn't it?
And, I always tell this time of year, it's important to try to find comparative matchup. So when you look at this Washington team, what do they compare to? Well, it's a tough comparison because they have a terrible offense and an amazing defense. So you try to split the difference. Let's look at Washington's defense, and let's try to compare it to where the Bucs have played against defenses like that this season.
Okay.
They played the Rams, and they got beat really bad on Monday night. They played the Saints. They got beat really bad on Sunday night. Those are the other teams that have comparative analytical metrics to the Washington defense. Now, on the other side of the ball, Washington's offense is a mess, and I think that's where Tampa has a huge advantage in this game. Alex Smith is hurt. Washington has not been scoring a lot of points. Tampa Bay has been scoring a lot of points, but I think that defensive line for Washington is the great equalizer. That's why I like Washington here. I think if you're getting this above a touchdown, it's a very solid number. The under is going to keep coming down as well because I think Tom Brady has shown he will take what the defense gives him and not try to take too much in the playoffs. He's a veteran. He's been down this road before. He will do just enough to win this game, which means they probably won't cover the spread. But again, it's a little tough just to blindly back a team that's going to win because you think they're going to win. They've got to cover this number as well. I think Washington's got enough defense to keep them in it, and Alex Smith makes a couple of plays. I don't think Washington wins this game, but again, a little bit closer than maybe the experts think.
I'm glad you brought up the whole defensive side of things because DVOA is something that we always take a close look at. Opponent DVOA versus the offense as well. That is an aggregate of the season. But when you face some of those top 10 defenses, you start looking at this over-under. The over-under right now is at 44.5. I know that Washington limped into the playoffs, but man, this D-line loves to pin their ears back. And we know that Tom Brady is a statue back there and doesn't like to move off his spot.
Yeah, and this feels, and also don't count out the Bucs. The Bucs defense is also a very formidable unit. We all know about Todd Bowles. I mean, he's done an incredible job as the coordinator of this defense. He's got one of the highest blitzing rates in the league. Here's why that's interesting. So Philly on Sunday night against Washington, I won't get into the controversy with who played on offense for Philly, but Philly's defense did a really good job getting after Alex Smith, who's also very immobile right now with that injured calf, with only 4 defensive linemen. They didn't have to blitz in order to get pressure on Alex Smith. I think that's more of a knock on Washington's offense than anything else. If the Bucs defense, which tends to be more of a blitzing defense, can maybe be a little bit less aggressive in this game, I think they can have a significant advantage on that Washington offense. Now, we'll see how it plays out. Adjustments are always interesting, especially in-game adjustments. But I think both defenses are really strong units, and I think this under is going to continue to drop. I was able to grab 46.5 very early in the week. Okay. I think it'll continue to fall a little bit closer to 44, 43 as we get to game time.
Yeah, this Bucs defense isn't the Warren Sapp, Simeon Rice, Derek Brooks defense. However, they're pretty close, especially led by Todd Bowles, who could be the new head coach of the New York Jets.
Oh, well, we've already been down that road before.
Right. I just had to throw that. All right, so that's how he sees the Saturday games. Make sure you check out how he feels about the Sunday matchups as well. For Jared Smith of SportsGrid, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.